I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to everyone on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, and together Rebecca and I are about to craft an amazing hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and family, and the little birds, the big birds, and the fish, and the plants, and the animals, and the protistas, and the bacterias, and the mycelium, and everyone and everything. Because, like it or not, we are all part of this fantastic planet called Earth. And we have a typically fantastic show for you today. We're going to just chat for a few minutes here. And please feel free to call in at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007 about any sort of ecological or environmental issue you want to talk about, like data centers, for example. You might have some questions about them. Or you can text anytime during the show, 419-973-5841. That's 419-973-5841. And so, as I said, we're going to chat for the next 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to have an interview with our good friend Diane D'Arrigo from NIRS, because the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, has done a typically outrageous thing. He's gotten rid of something called ALARA, as low as reasonably achievable. And this means, this actually has big health implications for you and your family and all the other critters and plants and stuff that we live on the planet.
It's going to be a hail.
A what?
As high as you want.
Oh,
a hail.
High as you want.
Yeah.
Instead of ALARA. I like ALARA. Sounds a lot better.
It does sound a lot better on several levels, actually.
Okay. So after Diane's interview, we will have our advertisers and patrons, our wonderful, wonderful advertisers and patrons. And then, Rebecca, it will be your turn at the mic. What have you got?
I have got Atlanta's Peachtree Creek.
Peachtree Creek. Okay. A very accidents-full title there. So looking forward to that.
Picturesque, too. I really like it for that reason.
And then ecological news from around the world, and some extremely shocking, but I tried to temper it. There are a few good news stories out there, so it's not all doom and gloom, but I have to warn you, there is a fair bit of doom and gloom this week in terms of environmental policies of different governments around the world. And hopefully, as I said, at some point, we'll hear from you at 877-909-1007. Okay, well, this past week was an interesting one for me. My mother lives in Western New York, and those of you who listen to the show regularly know that my sister who lived with her just recently passed away, so we've all decided, all the siblings have decided that I'm going to go back more often. We're all going to check in on her more often, but I'm probably going to go stay with her a few days out of every month just to make sure everything's okay in the household. And so, being me, I decided to take the train rather than make the 6-hour drive.
Trains are cool.
Yes, trains are very cool. And the train ticket, actually, we looked at the prices of the gas versus the train ticket, and it's only about $10 more to take the train. And the train goes pretty much at night. It leaves Toledo at 3:30, and it arrives in Buffalo around 9:30 in the morning. And then coming back, it leaves Buffalo about 12:30 at night and gets back here about 6:30 in the morning, which means that I don't lose half a day. I get that whole day on either side to do whatever I want because I'm not sitting behind a wheel. And, I used to say any day that I don't have to drive is a good day. I kind of tempered that once I got my Wonder Van. It's like now it's any day I don't have to use gas to get around is a good day. But I really like the train. I enjoy it. Unfortunately, it was, just full disclosure here, it was about 3 hours late going, and then about an hour late back.
So about the same as a plane would have been.
Yeah, it's right. It's
These
very
days.
comparable to planes these days.
Yeah.
But the one nice thing about leaving so late here from Toledo is that usually when I'm driving, most of the route is dark. But because the train was so late, when we went through Cleveland, the sun was up, and I got to look around and see things a lot more. And I saw several bald eagles, which was cool.
Ooh.
Yeah, near the lake. And the train really goes right along the lake. In fact, there's this one section in Port Clinton
Yep.
where you are on train tracks that are on the lake. They've built
Right.
this little spit of land. It's about 2 miles long. That literally it's just lake on either side of you, and it's like you're flying above the lake. It's really bizarre. But something that I did notice also that we always forget about this is that Cleveland has light rail. It has electric light rail for commuters.
The rapid transit.
The rapid transit. And
We just call it the rapid trains.
the rapid
When I
train-
lived there, yeah.
Yeah.
Or just the rapid.
And they go out to the suburbs, they have a good coverage, and they have a trade station for the rapid train that is in the same station as the Amtrak train. So you could literally hop on a train in your suburb of Cleveland and go pretty much anywhere. I learned that there's a train up to Toronto that you can catch, and I'm thinking I might do that sometime, is just hop on the train in Toledo and take it up to Toronto.
That would be cool.
It's called the Maple Leaf.
Nice.
And it goes from Toronto to New York City, and you cross over, you make the transfer in Buffalo.
Okay.
So it's really nice. But of course, I also saw one of the things you also see is the crumbling remains of our rail infrastructure. Abandoned train stations. There's one in Buffalo called Central Terminal.
Now
which-
I've heard a lot of creepypastas. Never get off the train at one of those. It's gonna be very bad.
Yeah. But I also, when I had to wait my 3 hours, I went and explored the Toledo station, the Martin Luther King station there. If you go up, take the elevator up to the third floor, you get to see how it used to be, because they still have the Art Deco style.
It's very fancy.
It's really cool. I've got some pictures. I'll include those in the video version of the show. But it's just a reminder that we've done it before.
Yeah.
And we are still doing it in places
Yeah.
like Cleveland. And we're not making enough of that. We're not using our knowledge and our ability to switch to low carbon and zero carbon transportation fast enough. Okay, we're making some progress globally, but it's really not good enough.
We need our streetcar system back in Toledo. We used to have one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Toledo had a great streetcar system. My father-in-law used to talk about how when they lived in the city of Toledo, he and his mother, they would take the electric trolley basically out to Rossford because that's where the Ukrainian church was.
Ah, yes.
And
Okay.
so, it's literally you just hop on and again, this is electric, which is so much more efficient than CO2, but then in terms of carbon generation and in terms of energy, internal combustion engines are only like 20% efficient, 16%. They have a theoretical limit of like 24%, which nobody ever reaches. But electric vehicles are routinely, just on average, about 40% efficient. So a lot more of that energy is used to do what you want it to do.
Why did I think that Carol was Polish?
Well, her part of Ukraine has changed hands many
Okay,
times.
right. Whoever's winning, which
Right.
is usually not Poland.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They
Okay.
considered themselves Ukrainian, but after her grandmother came over here, Poles took it over in one of the wars or skirmishes. I forget which one exactly. So they considered themselves Ukrainian. Now they could be considered Polish, but it's it's all that confusing border situation.
Right.
And so and speaking of outrageous things in terms of like shifting stuff, I was on the way in and I heard a story on C-SPAN because yes, I have C-SPAN on my car radio. That's how news junkie I am. And they were talking about pardons, and I'm sure you've all heard about the outrageous pardons that the Trump administration's doing in terms of pardoning things like drug dealers and fraudsters. And in fact, they talked about this one woman who apparently was the former governor of Puerto Rico who went to prison for fraud, and then she got pardoned by Trump in his first term. And then she went and committed a brand new fraud, got caught and convicted for that one, and Trump just pardoned her again.
Okay.
So, no denial of guilt or anything. No, like, oh, she didn't do this. It's just Trump saying, yeah, you could do that.
Oh,
So I guess she gets one more, and then she gets a free. You don't even have to go to trial anymore. They just punch a little card.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so
But the reason I brought it up on this show is because one of the people he pardoned was the owner of an environmental services corporation who took millions of dollars to treat sewage and instead just dumped it straight into a river. Yeah. And so corruption and environmental degradation really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because that really happens in the most corrupt countries. The water is the dirtiest, the air is the dirtiest, the food is the most contaminated, because one of the main things people who are practicing fraud is doing is trying to get around regulations on things like not polluting stuff and not having to put on pollution control equipment and basically not having to spend any money to make money. And so, when they weigh the cost of a bribe versus the cost of putting scrubbers on your smokestack, a lot of people make the business decision that it's cheaper to just pay a bribe. But of course, then that cost comes out of everybody else because the rest of the people get sick and can't get good food, and so we are not in good times, basically. And what we really need right now is for the government to be protecting us more, to be looking out for the little guy more. And that actually is what the Trump administration promised to do, and that's what they got elected on. But instead, they're doing some really outrageous stuff, like getting rid of this ALARA standard. And so I called up our friend Diane D'Arrigo to ask her about it and some of the implications of it. So let's go to that interview now. Thank you for being on For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and your organization?
Diane D'Arrigo, Nuclear Information and Resource Service.
Okay, Diane, welcome back. I asked you on today to talk about ALARA, which
As low as reasonably achievable.
yes, which has been the standard for radiation exposures for people from the nuclear industry for forever, right? For pretty much
Yes. Well, has been a scientific consensus that there is no safe dose of ionizing radiation. So the best, I wouldn't say it's a regulation, but the best policy around the world has been to keep the doses to workers, to the public, as low as reasonably achievable, because in general, more radiation causes more cancer and other health effects, and the goal is to minimize that. This is not only an issue in the nuclear industry, the nuclear power and weapons complex, mining, milling, and all the industries related, but it's also very much a part of the medical establishment, that medical workers and patients are exposed to radiation a lot. And the goal is always to keep their doses as low as possible, our doses as low as possible. Doing away with this will impact practically everybody.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to point out, is that Chris Wright, the Secretary of Energy, just announced that he's getting rid of ALARA, that he's just tossing it out the window.
Yes, that's what Secretary of Energy has decided to do. And it's at the same time that the President Trump's executive order, which he issued on May 23rd, 2025, it gives the Nuclear Regulatory Commission 9 months until February to come up with a new draft regulation. Well, actually, so to come up with a new draft regulation, and then by November of 2026 to have a final rule. And his proposed changes would also do away with ALARA. They would do away with the basic science of radiation, and they could potentially legalize releasing radioactive materials and doses to the public that are not even, for the benefit of the person who gets exposed.
I think it's pretty safe to say that this isn't being driven by some sort of new research that shows that radiation isn't harmful, right? There's
not at all. The science is still. In fact, every time it's researched, again, it comes up with radiation actually being more harmful than previously expected, previously understood. And there's a study just out of Harvard that shows significant cancers around the Pilgrim reactor in Massachusetts. So there is starting to be research that actually shows a relation between radiation and cancer in the environment.
Right. That's Harvard study basically looked at how close people were living to nuclear power plants in Massachusetts, and they found the closer they were within a 5-mile radius, the more likely they were to get cancer.
And that's just one of many studies. I mean, when the National Academy of Sciences did its research, it would compile, and the National Academy of Science is unabashedly pro-nuclear, but they would do studies on the impacts of radiation called the biological effects of ionizing radiation. And those studies, done every 10 to 20 years, revealed an increased amount of risk per amount of dose. So the higher the dose, the more the chance of cancer. And this is based on a curve, a chart. If you chart the amount of cancer and the amount of radiation, the more radiation, the more cancer as you go up the chart. But at the low end now, there are scientists such as Dr. John Goffman and many others who have found that at the low end, you actually get more cancer per unit dose than at the higher doses. So it's still every amount of radiation causes some amount of cancer, and the more radiation, the more cancer, but more cancer per unit dose at low doses, especially low continuous doses. So if you are in an environment where you're getting a small amount of radioactivity, but you get it over and over and over again, your cells aren't killed off like they are with a high dose. And so it re-injures the cells as they're trying to heal themselves, and that can lead to a cancer. So that's one theory. Then there is a theory which has not been established scientifically, that at low doses it's good for you, hormesis. That is that low doses of radiation actually, and some studies may show this, but not in the long term, not over time. So even if it looks like there's a boost, the amount of cancer increases from that amount of radioactivity over time. Mm-hmm. So this model that is being, it's called the linear no threshold or no LNT model. It means that there's no dose that's safe. That's the upshot. And that's what the Executive Order 14300 that was issued in May of 2025 does. It directs the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to consider doing away with the linear no threshold model. And that could then lead to much higher doses, much more allowable doses. And it also directs that the concept of ALARA be eliminated, and it suggests that a determinate dose be established, meaning that some dose of radiation is essentially safe, and you are safe enough to not regulate below, and that would mean that doses could up to a certain amount wouldn't even be regulated, and that a fight that we've had many, many times below regulatory concern, that nuclear waste and materials could be released from regulatory control and go into either regular garbage or into recycling to make consumer goods. So you could have radioactive metal being used to make baby toys, zippers, frying pans, anything. It would release not just radioactive metal, but it could also release other materials such as soil or wood or plastics, anything that can be recycled. Not that plastics can, but anything that could be recycled could potentially, if it's radioactive, go into the commercial marketplace. All so right. It's, again, going to affect all of us.
Basically, by getting rid of ALARA, that's the first step in essentially allowing the nuclear industry to irradiate us, to irradiate regular citizens.
That's one of the steps. That's the one coming from the Department of Energy. Now, the executive order told the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to consult with the Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency, because all of those agencies have some role in allowing public exposures. They're called standards to protect against radiation, but they're really standards to allow exposures to radiation. And what we need to do here, if they're going to reopen these regulations, then they need to improve the regulations. So our push is that the regulations be, if they're going to be changed at all, they'd be changed to protect the most vulnerable in the life cycle of humans. For example, babies and women get more cancer per unit dose, or at the same dose. Let me say that again. Babies and women get more cancer per the same amount of radiation as do men. Radiation harms men, but more women will get cancer than men, and many more children, especially little girls, will get cancer if they're exposed as a little girl. So 7 times more little girls will get cancer than men if exposed to a set amount. And for every 2 men who get cancer, 3 women will get cancer from the set amount of radiation. So what that means is that the legal doses don't protect us all. They protect, well, they legalize exposures and some amount of cancers to men, but they are allowing much more to women and to babies because they don't pay attention to the difference in effect from that amount of radiation. When radiation doses were first established, it was to protect workers in the nuclear weapons industry. Well, now the radiation is way beyond that. It's out into the environment. It's in many other places, and we are all exposed all the time.
So getting rid of ALARA, I theoretically or supposedly this is supposed to help the nuclear industry, right? Make it easier to build reactors and to create casual exposures or routine exposures.
Cavalier, I mean, it's going to take, if adopted, I mean, well, I guess at the Department of Energy, it's essentially adopted, but we have a much larger fight against this whole thing on our hands that we need to take on. And the Department of Energy is one agency doing this, and they are a very important agency because they make the weapons. But in our fight against this, which will be against both what the Department of Energy is doing and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, we're going to need to get as many individual comments into the Nuclear Regulatory Commission as soon as they put out their proposed rule from February to March. And if I could say one more thing that we're pushing for, if standards are going to change, we want to make them also consider other health effects from radiation, because radioactivity does cause cancer, and the nuclear establishment, when they were first making regulations, they only chose cancer to look at, but radiation causes heart disease, radiation causes reduced immunity and therefore susceptibility to many other diseases. So if they're going to change the standards, they need to change them in a way that is more protective. And we do need to fight this DOE change against ALARA, but we also need to try to fight the larger radiation orders that will result, that they're expected to come out from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And this will also set a stage for the Department of Energy and the Environmental Protection Agency and other agencies that deal with nuclear, Department of Defense, Department of Transportation. I mean, there are many agencies that are affected.
So getting rid of ALARA right now, but without replacing it with anything at this point, I mean, doesn't that kind of throw everything open at this point? I mean, are there still any sorts of limits that are being
well, there are at this point regulatory limits that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and the Environmental Protection Agency have, and those are in place in your doctor's office and in the industry. The Department of Energy does have its own standards it allows workers to get 5 REMs a year. The ALARA principle is one that drives the allowable exposures. It tries to push the allowable lower the doses to the workers and the public below the legal limits. So they still at this point have to meet the legal limits, which are way too lax. That's what I was just talking about, is we need to prevent the weakening of the legal limits. ALARA is a principle that says, okay, if a worker can get 5 REMs a year, or what is that, 5,000 millirems a year, but you're able to operate in a way that they only get 1 REM or 1,000 millirems, then you need to push for that. You need to make an effort to reduce the dose within the legal amount. So ALARA is a principle in practice. Like if there's a legal dose that you can, a medical worker can receive, but they really don't want to be at the maximum of their exposures. So it's bad because it's a, yeah.
Yeah, so it meant that people that were creating radioactive isotopes and radiation were always supposed to try for 0 exposure, right? But
Yeah, it's
But
a
putting the
goal of,
word reasonable in there meant that, they didn't have to reach zero, but but that should be sort of the goal. You should always try to not
I think
expose.
everybody agrees that the nuclear industry and nuclear activities could not take place if we had a zero exposure limit, because there'll always be some exposure. Part of the reason that we have fought against picking a legal release level into the environment, into consumer goods and the regular trash that gets burned or buried or transported, is that you want to minimize the amount.
Right. All right. Well, terrible news from the Department of Energy, but it sounds like we've got a fight on our hands this year, 2026. So, how could people follow what you're doing and
I'm just about to update my radiation page on our website at nirs.org, www.nirs.org, Nuclear Information and Resource Service. And we have a button at the top that says that you can sign up for alerts. I can't remember what it says in the button, but you'll figure it out when you see the web page. It's clear that you can sign up for more information.
Okay. So that was our interview with Diane. What did you think? What do you think about this fact that the Trump administration's getting rid of the whole idea of as low as reasonably achievable? I mean, Obama's favorite saying was, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. But the problem is, if you don't strive for perfection, if you're not always trying to get to that zero exposure thing, you end up with mediocrity. If you're not trying to be perfect, if you're just trying to be good enough, you usually end up being not quite good enough. If you know what I mean, it's a question of goals. So, all right. Well, that's was our interview with Diane, and now it's time to hear from our wonderful patrons and sponsors.
Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place? It's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future.
Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or you can call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And of course, 4 Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. There they searched for 4 Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They scrolled through looking for a membership level that matched their budget, signed up, and now every month a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us, and that's how we can keep bringing you this wonderful information on the air. I bet you probably didn't hear that Department of Energy got rid of ALARA before. I mean, this is the sort of thing we find out and try to bring to you because it's important that we know.
It sounds like a settlement that would be owned by elves. ALARA.
ALARA.
Yeah.
Yes. Go visit ALARA.
Yeah.
Yes. With our elven cloaks. Yeah. So, all right, cool. And one other thing, I want to remind you that we are upgrading 4 Green Future into the digital age. We're actually using a hashtag now, hashtag FAGF. And we're going to be upgrading all our audio and visual productions thanks to our wonderful Shabazz Khan, who's helping out in that manner. Okay, Rebecca, up to you now. What have you got?
Okay, well, since Martin Luther King Day is coming up very soon here, and Martin Luther King was, in fact, born in Atlanta. So I thought I would do something about, nature in Atlanta. And Atlanta is kind of an interesting place, nature-wise. It's up in the Appalachian foothills, which makes it a lot cooler and breezier than a lot of other cities in the South.
Uh-huh.
So that's a thing in its nature. It's also referred to as the city in a forest because it's got so many trees, so many big trees around.
Mm-hmm.
And we may remember it was the unfortunate home of the Coplanta incident.
Yeah, where protesters moved into the forest to try to prevent it from being cut down to make what they called Cop City. Yeah, we actually...
And somebody got shot.
Yeah, someone was killed.
Yeah.
We actually visited that back during that whole thing. If you look back at our past episodes, we have a story where we went around in that forest. So go ahead.
We do. But another thing in Atlanta is something called Peachtree Creek, which Martin Luther King may have even played in at some point. We don't know. But
Peachtree Creek.
Yeah, it's a major stream in Atlanta. It's 7.5 miles long. And enters the Chattahoochee River south of Vinings, apparently. So its source and its terminus are both not in Atlanta. I believe. I'm pretty sure. Mm-hmm. But yeah, originally it was the original native village in the area that sort of set Atlanta in motion, and that was called Standing Peachtree. And Fort Peachtree was apparently built nearby to guard against the Cherokee. I think it's a Cherokee in the creek in the area, so I don't know which the village was. Maybe Creek, I'm not sure. But yeah, and also there was the Battle of Peachtree Creek in the Civil War, which was part of the Sherman campaign, which was not a good time for Atlanta. A lot of people were probably using Peachtree Creek to find where their houses used to be because you couldn't recognize anything. Mm-hmm. It got burnt up so bad. And the source it splits into north and south forks upstream, and probably comes down from the Appalachian Mountains. I'm guessing those both come from there, and it often floods during heavy storms, which is kind of bad. So. Yeah. The benefits, though, of this creek are it's a major tributary to the Chattahoochee, so its water flow and quality and volume affects their water supply very, very closely. It supports diverse aquatic and terrestrial life forms, and the areas. How can I put this? The areas that do have a healthy stream bank help manage runoff and prevent erosion. Although those are still serious problems, but the parts that got left shaggy are still doing their best. Mm-hmm. It also serves as a greenway connecting fragmented habitats that are sort of scattered along its length. And so, if you're a critter and you need to find a new place to live in a hurry or a new food supply, you can take the creek bank route, and is known as an urban ecology corridor. Also, because it's in an urban area, it provides a lot of research and education and recreation opportunities, which, because it's around a lot of people, you don't have to get in a car to go there or get in a bus and go on a school trip. It's, you can casually drop by uh-huh. Or a park ranger can tell you stuff, or all kinds of good things can happen. But yeah, some threats to this is that it's in an urban area, so therefore it's near a lot of impervious surfaces that water does not penetrate, and it gets pollution from the surrounding areas too. So it's doing its best, but it's compromised in a lot of areas, and all this dirty water is like floating right into it. That it's trying really hard to filter, but it needs our help to restore the creek bank so it can be better at that and not flood as much.
Hear, hear. Yeah, the ecological importance of connecting places. We used to think that you could sort of have an island of something here and an island of something there, but as we understand genetics more, the more isolated those islands are, the less healthy the populations are.
Righty-ho.
And the more that you can make, you can go from one place to another to, get busy with somebody else in your species, the healthier everybody is. So
Ask the Habsburgs. Oops, you can't. They inbred themselves out of existence.
yeah, there you go. Same principle. All right. Thank you, Rebecca. And now it's time for ecological news. And I picked this next story to go first because it kind of complements what Diane was just talking about in terms of ALARA, where the the energy secretary no longer says we have to get as low as reasonably achievable for radiation. This past week, this is covered by a lot of outlets, but I'm using the story from Mother Jones on January 15th. The EPA has stopped considering human life when they're making their decisions. I guess that kind of makes them inhuman monsters.
Yeah, it kind of does. Yeah.
Yeah. So the title of the piece is, In the Eyes of Trump's EPA, Human Health is Now Literally Worthless. And so basically what the situation has been is that whenever a new source of pollution was considered or a new regulation was considered, they had a whole bunch of things they had to consider, including like how is this going to affect business and how is it going to affect human health? Will it kill people? Will it make them sick? And you use that information to create what's called a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you add up, okay, it's going to kill this many people and make this many people sick, and then say, oh, but it's going to make trillions in profits. Well, we'll go ahead and do that. But now they've gotten rid of the human half of the equation. Now they only look at the cost. They no longer look at the effects of human health in terms of the benefit.
Are you still the EPA if you're doing that? You're just becoming a thing that assesses how much money a thing can make.
Well, you need somebody to bribe, basically.
Oh,
somebody to pay
okay.
off.
I understand.
So they'll still be
Right.
around. But particularly they're using this for ozone and fine particulate matter, which is soot. It used to be called microsoot, basically little things below 2.5 microns. These things cause heart attack, asthma attack. About 135,000 people a year die prematurely. In other words, had there not been the pollution, they could keep living.
Mhm.
But this is one of the reasons our life expectancy is dropping in the U.S., even as it keeps getting longer. in
I
places
may,
like
by
Japan and
the way,
Europe.
be at some point be one of those people because my lung capacity is kind of messed up because of COVID, and I have a lot of trouble breathing in the summer now. So that may be end up being how I go out.
Could be. Well, you wouldn't be alone.
True.
So Lee Zeldin, the head of the EPA, says, just pure gaslighting. Oh, this is not what we're doing.
Mhm.
We're not, but it literally is. I mean,
Yeah.
this was the decision. No longer consider effects on human health in terms of a cost-benefit analysis. And every former EPA official agrees that this is what they're doing. So Lee Zeldin is the one who's lying here. So, this is part of a larger picture. The EPA closed off their Office of Research and Development, which was the part of the EPA that figured out, okay, how damaging is this? How much, if you put a ton of mercury into the air, how many people are going to get sick and how sick are they going to be? They eliminated that office completely. So,
Okay.
yeah, so it's bad. It's really bad. So we got to counter that, of course, with a little bit of upbeat news. We have to go off to Asia for this. Coal power falls in India and China for the first time in decades, and with record clean energy growth.
To which we say, na 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 na, hey hey hey, goodbye.
Goodbye, coal. Yes. This is a story in the Independent on January 13th, and China's coal use dropped 1.6%, and India's coal use dropped 3%, and that has not happened since the 70s that both of them dropped at once, so 50 years. And a lot of people are thinking this may have been the peak. We may have already passed the point where India and China are going to be putting out less CO2 and using less
Okay.
coal. So this happened even though demand continued to increase in both those countries. And the thing about it is that India and China together put out more than half the globe's coal use. So when they start dropping, that has an outsized effect. It really improves things for the whole planet, which is great. And the reason, of course, is that they put up wind and solar. India in 2025 added 35 gigawatts of solar and 6 gigawatts of wind. China added 300 gigawatts of solar and 100 gigawatts of wind. And that more than made up for their increased demand. And so they started to cut back on the coal. Solar and wind together generated 450 terawatt hours of power. Nuclear, it's poor, sad nuclear, did less than a tenth of that. That did 35 terawatt hours. And nuclear capacity did increase a tiny bit in 2025 in China, but it was just slaughtered by wind and solar. So coal plants are still being built there. They're still adding a 28% increase in capacity, but even though they're building new ones, they're not using them, or not using them as much. They're cutting back on all of them. So some good news there from India and China. And unfortunately, we're going to have to follow that up with some really bad news.
Uh-oh.
We've talked about deep sea mining before, in terms of Norway had threatened to start deep sea mining in 2025. Well, Japan was kind of off the radar, but they've decided just go ahead and start doing it. This was a story in oceanographicmagazine.com, and they have out there something called rare earth mud, which is mud that contains some rare earth elements like neodymium, dysprosium, and terbium.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, sorry. Excuse me, terbium. And those are used, those rare earths are used in things like cell phones and EVs and so forth. And China is the main supplier for the whole world. But China, this past year, cut off their supply of rare earths to things that are called dual use. Like it could be used for weapons or regular technology.
Right.
And so, but that includes almost everything.
Right.
So
yeah.
like drones, for example, can be used as weapons of war, but but most drones aren't, thank goodness. But China cut off the supply to both. So if they start mining, well, they are going to start mining in about a week. They've decided we're just going to start. They sent out a experimental ship. They're going to. It's called the Chikyu, CHIKYU, and they're going to try to extract some of these rare earths from the mud that's about 2,000 feet deep in the ocean. They're doing this at a coral atoll, which is 1,000 miles southeast of Tokyo. And if they do, all environmentalists, all oceanographers, everybody agrees that it will cause irreversible harm to the ocean ecosystems, because when they remove things like the manganese nodules, it eliminates, there's not much oxygen down there 2,000 feet deep, but there is some, just enough for life to exist, because they've got things like manganese nodules that put oxygen into the water. And so if you suck those all up, if you pull them up, then there's zero oxygen and nothing can survive there, not even bacteria. And the ocean may never recover.
Not to mention, do you have any idea how many creepypastas start on oil rigs with strange rules?
Yeah. So
This is and the Mariana Trench. We don't know what's down there.
right,
and
yeah,
people are going to have ideas.
we might wake something up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So hopefully China or Japan can be dissuaded from this plan for ocean sterilization, but it's interesting that the current global instability, because why would China care if Japan had possible weapons or possible rare earths they could use for weapons, unless they're planning to do something which could provoke a military response from Japan.
Yeah.
And so all this instability is also hurting the ocean. All right, another story, going to The Guardian, and this story was released on January 10th, and the reason they released it on January 10th was because, as the title says, The world's richest 1% have already used their fair share of emissions for 2026, says Oxfam.
Oh, okay, great.
In other words,
I need to stop now for the
the
rest of
richest
the year.
right, the richest 1% use so much more, or release so much more CO2 than the rest of the world. In fact, the richest 0.1% used their share of CO2 in 3 days, so by January 3rd.
Wow.
And compare that to the poorest 50%, who actually they don't even use their full share in a year.
Right.
So thousands of times, the richest 1% with their private jets and their yachts and their 6 houses and all that, they put out so much more CO2 than the rest of the world that the problem, of course, is that the global warming impact hits the poorest and the middle income countries the hardest. And Oxfam has estimated that the effects of global warming are going to cost about $44 trillion worth of wealth from those nations by 2050.
Oh, boy.
And the other problem, of course, is that in addition to putting out more carbon, the richest 1% are also still investing in fossil fuels. Even though, as we reported last week, investments for renewables is double what it is for fossil right now, which is great. But they're still putting trillions into fossil fuel. And what they're calling for is an extra carbon tax on the wealthiest. So taxing the private jets.
Good.
Taxing their oil and gas investments, specifically targeting them in order to reduce their insane levels of CO2 production. Unfortunately, in the U.S., the big, beautiful bill went in exactly the opposite direction. In fact, if you're a billionaire in the U.S., you get to 100% deduct private jet purchases from your taxes.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? How does this help anyone besides the billionaires?
Yeah. So a private jet costs between $2 and $90 million. And if you buy one, you get to subtract that from your gross income. So you may end up if you buy a couple private jets, you may not have to pay any taxes. And yeah, so not good. So the big, ugly bill really took us in the wrong direction. So now we need to balance this out with some good news. Coming back here to good old Ohio, this is a story in the June-February issue of OhioMagazine.com. And the title is Joy Valley Nature Preserve Protects Thousands of Acres in Appalachian, Ohio. And there was a partnership formed between the Athens Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy. And there was a donor, Betty Lowe, Lowe, donated 3,000 acres. And this is an absolutely beautiful part of Ohio. It's double the area that the Athens Conservancy has managed up to this point. And in that 3,000 acres, there's 26 species of warblers. There's several species of bats. There's a whole bunch of amphibians, including the endangered hellbender. And Athens, the arrangement is that Athens Conservancy will actually own it and manage it, but the Nature Conservancy will hold the conservation easement. So the theory is that nobody will ever be able to build on it because the Nature Conservancy won't sell the conservation easement.
Right.
So there's a nice little bit of news. They're planning to open it up with some trails and open it up to the public in the next couple years. But for right now, 3,000 acres at least has been protected. Okay, next story. And this comes to us from our friends at Press, which is the Piketon residents. And Vina Coley says that, basically what's happening is that Piketon, Oklo, is supposedly going to put small modular reactors in Piketon in order to power a metadata center.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. So
They were originally like that group was about fracking, right?
No. Press has always been about nuclear stuff.
Okay.
Because of the uranium reprocessing down there that poisoned the whole area, and they had to abandon a school because they found plutonium contamination like 5 miles from the site.
Okay, it's Piketon residents.
I didn't write it down.
Oh,
Yeah,
whoops.
Exit residence.
Haha.
Yeah,
I asked
environmental.
Joe a question. He
Yeah,
didn't know.
sorry.
He always knows.
I usually know. And as soon as the show's over, on the ride home, I'm going to go,
Clearly,
press,
yes,
that's what that
yeah.
stands
We'll
for.
we'll update you.
But on the 14th, they released a press release. And the thing about this is that the government is supplying the fuel for this reactor. So that's nice work if you can get it. If you're running a nuclear plant, you don't even have to pay for the fuel to run it because the government's just going to give it to you. They also are giving them billions in grants and billions in tax abatements. In her press release, Vina points out that the community is already contaminated and has been contaminated for decades. And another member of press, Paula Spears, points out that data centers always promise more jobs than they deliver.
Mm-hmm.
So, they promise thousands, but a 2017 U.S. Chamber of Commerce study says that in terms of, if you count everything, not just the people who work there, but like the waitresses at the restaurant that can open across from it, and, the people who work for the suppliers, and if you count everybody, a data center creates about 150 jobs. And we're spending billions and billions of dollars to create 150 jobs.
Yeah.
And if we were to use that money to put in windmills and solar panels, there'd be tons more jobs, and we wouldn't have to deal with nuclear waste. And, the actual employment is only about 12 people in one of these things, and most of that's security and custodians. And so I'm saying, let's just take those billions of dollars and just give them. Right?
Yeah.
Don't even bother making the nuke. Just,
Right.
All right. Well, that's it for this show. Thank you so much for listening. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
We are signing off.
But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!